You're planned to pipe to the heating and refrigeration unit, then to a junction box in the ceiling near the top of the framing, and finally come out with metal-clad whip into framing and loop out is acceptable. Here are some code considerations. The conduit should be rigid metal conduit or intermediate metal conduit, as stated in National Electrical Code Section 353.2. The junction box should be accessible for maintenance according to National Electrical Code Section 314.28. The length of metal-clad whip should not exceed 6 feet or 12 feet depending on the size of the circuit, per National Electrical Code Section 334.10. Metal-clad whip must be supported within 12 inches of the junction box and 36 inches from any other support point, per National Electrical Code Section 334.30. The conduit, junction box, and metal-clad whip must be properly grounded, per National Electrical Code Section 250. Consider these best practices. Use the standard junction box size for easier accessibility. Place the junction box in a convenient location for servicing and troubleshooting. Secure the junction box to the framing with appropriate mounting screws. Use a grommet where the conduit enters the junction box to prevent abrasions to the cable. Secure the metal-clad whip to the framing using metal-clad clips or straps. Ensure the whip is not kinked or crushed. When installing electrical systems in commercial spaces like restaurant storage areas, meticulous planning and adherence to the National Electrical Code are crucial. This ensures safety and compliance. Let's delve deeper into each aspect of the proposed plan. Firstly, regarding the conduit type, both rigid metal conduit and intermediate metal conduit offer robust protection for the conductors. Rigid metal conduit is typically used in areas where there is a high risk of physical damage, while intermediate metal conduit provides a lighter weight alternative without sacrificing significant protection. Selecting the appropriate conduit depends on the specific environmental conditions and the level of protection required. Secondly, the accessibility of the junction box is paramount for future maintenance and troubleshooting. National Electrical Code Section 314.28 mandates that all junction boxes be readily accessible without removing any part of the building structure or finish. This means the junction box should not be concealed behind walls or ceilings without access panels. The location should also allow enough space for technicians to safely work on the connections and perform necessary repairs or modifications. Thirdly, the length of the metal-clad whip is limited to prevent excessive voltage drop and ensure the integrity of the circuit. National Electrical Code Section 334.10 specifies the maximum length based on the circuit size to maintain adequate electrical performance and safety. It is essential to calculate the voltage drop for the intended load and select the appropriate conductor size to comply with the code requirement. Fourthly, proper support of the metal-clad whip is necessary to prevent strain on the connections and maintain the physical integrity of the wiring system. National Electrical Code Section 334.30 requires that the metal-clad whip be supported within 12 inches of the junction box and at intervals not exceeding 36 inches. This ensures that the cable is securely held in place and not subject to excessive bending or stress. Fifthly, grounding is a critical safety measure to protect against electrical shock and prevent equipment damage. National Electrical Code Section 250 outlines the requirements for grounding electrical systems, including the proper bonding of all metal parts to create a low impedance path for fault currents. The conduit, junction box, and metal-clad whip must be effectively grounded to ensure that any fault currents are safely conducted back to the source, tripping the circuit breaker and energizing the circuit. In addition to these code considerations, several best practices can enhance the reliability and safety of the installation. Using a standard junction box size simplifies the installation process and makes it easier to access the connections in the future. A convenient location for the junction box will minimize the time and effort required for maintenance and troubleshooting. Securing the junction box to the framing with appropriate mounting screws ensures that it is rigidly supported and not subject to vibration or movement. A grommet should be used where the conduit enters the junction box to protect the cable from abrasion and prevent damage to the insulation. The metal-clad whip should be secured to the framing with metal-clad clips or straps to maintain proper support and prevent sagging. Finally, it is important to ensure that the whip is not kinked or crushed, as this can damage the conductors and compromise the integrity of the circuit. In summary, the proposed plan for wiring the restaurant storage area is acceptable, provided that all code requirements and best practices are followed. Attention to detail and adherence to the National Electrical Code will ensure a safe and reliable electrical system that meets the needs of the restaurant. Remember to consult the latest edition of the National Electrical Code and local regulations for specific requirements and interpretations. Always prioritize safety and seek guidance from experienced professionals when working with electrical systems. Considering the specifics of the location in Connecticut, it's important to be aware of any local amendments or interpretations of the National Electrical Code that may be in effect. Local jurisdictions often have the authority to modify or supplement the National Electrical Code to address specific regional concerns or conditions. Checking with the local electrical inspector or building department can provide valuable insights into any unique requirements that may apply to the project. Additionally, Connecticut has adopted specific energy codes and building standards that may impact the selection of electrical equipment and materials. These codes are designed to promote energy efficiency and sustainability, and they may include requirements for lighting controls, insulation, and other energy-saving measures. Ensuring compliance with these codes is essential for obtaining the necessary permits and approvals for the project. Furthermore, the environmental conditions in Connecticut can influence the selection of materials and installation methods. The region experiences seasonal temperature variations, humidity, and occasional extreme weather events. Choosing electrical equipment and wiring that is suitable for these conditions is crucial for ensuring long-term reliability and performance. For example, using corrosion-resistant conduit and fittings can prevent damage from moisture and salt spray, while selecting insulation with appropriate temperature ratings can protect against overheating and degradation. In addition to these technical considerations, it's also important to be aware of the local labor market and prevailing wage rates. Connecticut has specific regulations regarding prevailing wages for construction projects, and these regulations may apply to the electrical work being performed in the restaurant storage area. Ensuring compliance with these wage requirements is essential for avoiding legal and financial penalties. Moreover, building a strong working relationship with the local electrical inspector can facilitate the permitting and inspection process. Open communication and collaboration can help to resolve any questions or concerns and ensure that the project is completed safely and efficiently. By addressing these local considerations, the electrical installation in the restaurant storage area can be tailored to the specific needs and conditions of the site, resulting in a reliable and compliant electrical system. Always prioritize safety and seek guidance from qualified professionals when working with electrical systems. Let's further elaborate on the practical aspects of implementing this plan, focusing on the selection of materials and the step-by-step installation process. Firstly, regarding the selection of rigid metal conduit or intermediate metal conduit, it's important to consider the specific environmental factors within the restaurant storage area. If the area is prone to moisture, chemicals, or physical impact, rigid metal conduit may be the better choice due to its superior strength and corrosion resistance. However, if weight is a concern or the environment is relatively benign, intermediate metal conduit can provide a cost-effective alternative. When selecting the conduit size, it's essential to calculate the total cross-sectional area of the conductors to ensure that they can be easily pulled through the conduit. National Electrical Code Chapter 9 provides tables that list the maximum number of conductors allowed in various conduit sizes. It's also important to choose conduit fittings that are compatible with the conduit type and size, and to ensure that all connections are properly tightened and sealed to prevent moisture ingress. Secondly, the selection of the junction box should be based on the number and size of the conductors that will be terminated within it, as well as the available space and mounting options. National Electrical Code Section 314.16 provides rules for calculating the minimum box size required for various wiring configurations. It's also important to choose a junction box that is rated for the environment in which it will be installed, such as an M4 enclosure for wet locations or an M7 enclosure for hazardous locations. When mounting the junction box, it's important to use appropriate hardware and techniques to ensure that it is securely attached to the framing. This may involve using screws, bolts, or anchors depending on the type of framing material. Thirdly, the selection of the metal-clad cable should be based on the ampacity requirements of the circuit as well as the environmental conditions. National Electrical Code Table 310.16 provides ampacity ratings for various conductor sizes and insulation types. It's also important to choose a metal-clad cable that is listed for the intended use, such as metal-clad cable for exposed installations or metal-clad cable for direct burial. When installing the metal-clad cable, it's important to follow the manufacturer's instructions and to avoid kinking or damaging the cable. The cable should be supported at intervals not exceeding 6 feet, and it should be protected from physical damage where it passes through walls or floors. Fourthly, grounding is a critical aspect of the installation, and it's important to follow the National Electrical Code requirements carefully. The conduit, junction box, and metal-clad cable should be bonded together to form a continuous ground path, and this ground path should be connected to the building's grounding electrode system. The grounding conductor should be sized according to National Electrical Code Table 250.122, and it should be installed in a manner that protects it from physical damage. Finally, it's important to inspect the completed installation to ensure that all connections are tight, all supports are in place, and all grounding requirements are met. A thorough inspection can help to identify and correct any potential problems before the system is energized. By following these practical guidelines, the electrical installation in the restaurant storage area can be completed safely and efficiently, resulting in a reliable and compliant electrical system. Remember to consult the latest edition of the National Electrical Code and local regulations for specific requirements and interpretations. Always prioritize safety and seek guidance from experienced professionals when working with electrical systems. To further clarify, let's address some common questions and concerns that may arise during the installation process. One common question is whether it's permissible to use flexible metal conduit instead of rigid metal conduit or intermediate metal conduit. While flexible metal conduit can be used in certain applications, it's generally not recommended for the main raceway in a restaurant storage area due to its lower strength and resistance to physical damage. Flexible metal conduit is more suitable for short runs to connect equipment or to navigate around obstacles. Another common question is how to properly support the conduit and metal-clad cable. The National Electrical Code requires that conduits and cable be supported at intervals that prevent sagging and protect them from physical damage. This can be accomplished using a variety of support methods, such as conduit clamps, cable straps, and J-hooks. The support should be securely attached to the building structure and spaced according to the code requirements. A third common question is how to properly terminate the metal-clad cable in the junction box. The National Electrical Code requires that metal-clad cable be terminated in a fitting that is designed for that purpose. These fittings typically consist of a connector body and a clamping mechanism that secures the cable to the fitting. It's important to ensure that the fitting is properly tightened and that the cable is not damaged during the termination process. A fourth common question is how to properly ground the electrical system. The National Electrical Code requires that all metal parts of the electrical system be bonded together to form a continuous ground path. This can be accomplished using grounding conductors, bonding jumpers, and grounding bushings. The ground path should be connected to the building's grounding electrode system, which consists of a grounding electrode and a grounding electrode conductor. A fifth common question is how to properly protect the wiring from physical damage. The National Electrical Code requires that wiring be protected from physical damage by installing it in conduit, cable trays, or other protective enclosures. In areas where the wiring is exposed to physical damage, it should be protected by installing guardrails or barriers. By addressing these common questions and concerns, the electrical installation in the restaurant storage area can be completed with confidence and assurance. Remember to consult the latest edition of the National Electrical Code and local regulations for specific requirements and interpretations. Always prioritize safety and seek guidance from experienced professionals when working with electrical systems.